All right, excellent. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Monday, February 5th meeting of Kimberley City Council. This meeting tonight is billed as a special meeting as opposed to regular, and the topic, as it has been for most of these special meetings for the last while, is the financial plan. We're rocketing down to the finish, hopefully sooner than later. And tonight we are going to be finalizing the capital and non-capital project plan. We only have two items on the agenda tonight, both pertaining to the financial plan. And we do have an in-camera meeting as well with a single item on it. So without further ado, I'd like to call the meeting to order, held here on the homelands of the Ktunaxa peoples. Maurice, do we have any late items?
We have no late items, Mr. Mayor.
All right, hearing none, could I have a mover to adopt the agenda? Councillor Cairns moves, Councillor McGuire seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. And because it's a special meeting, we don't have to take care of any minutes this evening. So we will roll right into the first item, which is the 2024-2028 capital and non-capital project plan. We have a number of motions to go through. We'll do these as we go, if that's okay with you, Jim. Yep. And I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you mentioned, we're here tonight to finalize the 5-year capital and non-capital project plan, 2024 through 2028. This is essentially the same presentation that council received on January 15th. So I'm not going to go through the projects in any great amount of detail. If council has any questions, be happy to answer them. We've got Nicole and Nick here this evening in case there are any lingering questions from last week. But there were a few changes that were made to the report here, so I'll touch on those. But if anybody's interested in some detailed information on the capital and non-capital project plan, you can click into Engage Kimberley on our website, and that presentation is loaded up there, and the YouTube video from that January 15th meeting will include some additional information as well. So just with regard to the changes, the capital and non-capital project plan, there were a couple of pages added, a couple of tables on pages 3 and 4, just with regard to capital project funding. So the first one on page 3 there, it speaks to municipal reserves. And in that table, you'll see that the asset management investment plan, council had a presentation on that. I believe it was in October, but it recommends that we spend on average $15.2 million a year just to keep up with asset maintenance and take care of deferred maintenance to have our assets where they need to be. We currently put about $5.7 million away into reserves each year. So that's a variance of about $9.5 million. So it's a fairly rudimentary analysis. It doesn't take into account any grant funds we may get or any borrowing we may undertake to complete capital projects. So you have to take that into account here. But if all we had was just the reserves that we're putting away to take care of the capital assets, again, we've got about 5.7, and the recommended annual investment is $15 million. So I'll be speaking more to this once we get further into the budget deliberation process, when we start talking about the operating budget and ultimately the tax adjustment. But a bit of a precursor for things to come here. I'd like to have a bit of a focused discussion on a way to incrementally increase those reserve contributions over time, which will ultimately impact that tax adjustment going forward. So the page 4, in addition to reserves, local governments can also borrow. We can enter into long-term debt agreements to fund some capital investment. The amount that we can borrow is set by the municipal tax regulation, and what it says is that the annual debt servicing cost can't exceed 25% of specific revenues, such as property taxes, fees, and unconditional grants that we have some control over. So at 2022 levels, for revenue, 2023 hasn't been finalized or calculated yet. We could borrow $70 million over 30 years at current interest rates. We're anticipating borrowing just over $23 million for the wastewater treatment plant, which leaves a potential borrowing capacity of just about $47 million. So to have that ability to borrow is one thing, but of course the kicker to that is that we have to service the debt payments as well. So just to put it into context, if we were to borrow $10 million for general capital, we would have to increase taxes by 5% just to service that debt. And the debt can also be serviced through parcel taxes we're proposing with the wastewater treatment plant. And the other primary source of funding for large capital projects is grants. But of course, I mean, reliance on grant funding prevents a bunch of challenges. For one thing, they're totally out of our control. The grant programs are sporadic. The timing may not fit with our capital plans, and typically they're oversubscribed. So we just don't know if we're going to get those or not. So again, I'm not going to go through the detail in the capital plan here, but there are a number of tables at the beginning of this document that kind of summarize the capital that we have planned over the next 5 years. So as noted on the next table there on page 5, we're planning on investing $132 million in capital over the next 5 years. The biggest chunk of that obviously is the wastewater treatment plant, planned capital project of just over $90 million. So if you remove that, we're still planning to spend $41 million on capital over the next 5 years, which is about an average of about $8 million a year. So fairly aggressive capital plan for good reason. I mean, we've got a lot of infrastructure and it needs a lot of work. So unless there are any specific questions, Mr. Mayor, I think that the first resolution in the and further, and then I can speak to the second one there.
All right, let's put the first one on the floor and then I'll go around the table for questions. Move receipt. Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor McGuire, seconds. Council, questions or comments? So I have a couple of comments in no necessary order of importance, I guess, really. So what kind of what you've explained, Jim, is that the contribution to reserves that we do every year, I guess I'm asking for a clarification on this. The contribution to reserves, which is roughly $5 million roughly, covers our depreciation for the year. Because we're somewhere between $4 and $5 million in depreciation. So all those reserves are doing is helping us stay whole, not dig the hole any deeper. So for us to look at reducing that infrastructure deficit, that money has to come from somewhere else other than reserves or just reserves. I mean, it's a balancing act clearly, but I'm just trying to paint a picture here on kind of what the hill is in front of us.
Yeah, no, that's a good way to put it. Essentially, that is what we're covering with that reserve contribution is depreciation, and anything over and above depreciation, which is, you know, getting us above that kind of the maintenance curve where our assets aren't costing us more every year to maintain because they're getting in poor condition. We are reliant on grants essentially, which again, we don't know whether we're going to get or not. So.
Right. I guess the second comment is around kind of a line in here where you've indicated that the projects that we've got for 2024 are all fully funded. So there are about 4 projects in there that are grant dependent. Clearly, if we don't get the grants, those projects don't happen. But of all of the projects that are not grant dependent, they are fully funded. That's correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess with respect to the asset management plan, just a couple of comments. I went and I grabbed the original plan from 2016. that Urban Systems had put together for us. And I remember very distinctly at the time when this was delivered, the infrastructure deficit that was identified at that time was $73 million. And I remember gasps and, somewhat panic around the table because we had never seen a number like that before. This was an awesome report because it not only got attention, but got us on a path to understanding what we needed to do to not just cover our depreciation every year, but make sure we're spending enough in capital money to be able to eat away at it. So interestingly, the average annual life cycle investment back in 2016 was estimated to be $8 million. It's now $15 million. There are a whole bunch of reasons for that. Inflation being part of it, the projects becoming real. For example, the wastewater treatment plant was identified then as a $35 million project. So a lot has changed since then, but it's all changed up. And although we have been making some good headway on retiring some of that infrastructure deficit every year, it's only the money over and above 4 million that we're spending on capital projects that actually is eating into that infrastructure deficit. So it's a relatively complicated job that you have and that staff has in being able to juggle all of this. And I think that the job you've done in putting together the projects for not just 2024, but the balance of the 5-year plan has been absolutely awesome. It was easy to read, understanding where the priorities were, fits within the council priorities. I just would like to commend you on the quality of the report, Jim. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay, there's no further comments. I'll call the question. All those in favor of receipt? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, next, the next item on the, did you want to add from here or should I go to the next?
Yeah, if you go to that next resolution.
Okay, the next resolution on the floor is that council approve the projects and their associated budgets as detailed in the capital and non-capital project plan presented at the February 5th special meeting. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Royer moves and Councillor McBain seconds. Okay.
I don't think so, again, unless there are any specific questions on any of the projects. There's a lot of information in that report. And the reason it's laid out that way, it's so it can be used for future reference as we go through the year if council wants to flip back to that to see what's kind of on the books. But
all right, go ahead, Councillor McBain.
Just the one, the Knighton Road realignment. There's a star beside it saying it's either fully or partially grant dependent. And then if we go on page 10, kind of it shows that it looks like it's being funded out of just, our regular revenues. So just want some clarification.
yeah, that project in particular, the piece that is grant dependent is the active transportation.
Oh, okay. That's
portion
right.
Of it.
Yep.
So if we don't get that grant, the rest of the project will proceed the realignment.
I just forgot about that. Thanks.
Yep. You're welcome.
Councillor Roberts.
Just a quick question. I know that you don't have to take us all down to the teeny tiny little ones, but it says that the significant projects are like 300,000 plus, and that not everything is inclusive. So how much discretionary stuff do you have that's less than 300,000, just as a lump maybe?
Bunch.
Okay.
That table is really kind of the intention of that is to give council a bit of a snapshot of the big stuff.
I appreciate that.
And if you scroll back to the for each year in the plan, like 2024, there's a couple of pages. It starts on page 15. And there's one of those for each year that lists all the projects right from, the
Okay.
tiny stuff.
So they're in here. They're just
Yep.
not in that first piece.
That's right.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Further? Pardon me. Okay, last call for comments, Jim. Good.
Yeah.
I'll call the question then. All those in favor of approval? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, next up is a motion that council directs staff to prepare a reserve fund expenditure bylaw to be brought back at a future meeting for consideration of the first three readings and eventual adoption to authorize the expenditure of $1.992 million from the Growing Communities Fund Reserve in 2025 to fund a portion of the Civic Center project that will include replacement of the boards, slab, and chiller. Mover, please. Councillor McGuire moves. Councillor Royer seconds. Discussion. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so the council will recall the Growing Communities Fund grant that was received by the city in 2023. It was in the amount of $3.414 million. And it can be used essentially for anything capital related. The preliminary capital and non-capital project plan that was presented to council on January 15th provided some suggestions on where that money could be invested. And it indicated that in that version of the plan, none of the projects in it were funded from that Growing Communities Fund reserve. So that the $3.414 million, council adopted a bylaw earlier this year to set that money aside in a reserve. So it'll sit there until we spend it. We've got a capital project on the books for 2025. The budget for it is $2.441 million, and it relates to the Civic Center board, slab, and chiller replacement. We've applied for a grant for that project. I think it's 2 or 3 times. It's been denied every time. It's getting to the point where in 2025, that chiller, that's the expiry date on that thing. So that's kind of driving this project. And previously it was in the budget it was contingent on receiving just about a $2 million grant for that project to proceed. So we're, given the fact that that project it's really being driven by the need to replace that chiller, we can't really have that project hanging out there and being grant dependent. We apply for these grants, and it's, I think the last one we applied for that project in particular, it was over a year before we found out. We just don't have the time to be doing that anymore. So by suggesting that we take this $1.9 million and kind of earmark that to fund that grant portion of the project, it removes it from being a grant contingent project. It allows us to continue to search out grant funds in the meantime. And if we do, we'll just leave that money in the reserve and find something else to spend it on.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Councillor McBain.
Yeah, I think that's the prudent thing to do. I think you kind of hit it on the head in your last sentence there is, we can continue to keep looking for these, but it's, don't want to say the writing's on the wall, but it's certainly been kind of clear that it's not, it hasn't been favorable for us. So I think it's the right thing to do. And I think I mentioned at another previous meeting that we had too about, because we've talked about all kinds of ideas for recreational facilities and, outside of the boards and the slab, the chiller is something that can be used really anywhere down the road. So I think to me, it's a really proactive and prudent step to just ensure that work gets done. So,
Councillor Dunavac.
So my understanding correct that 2025, then that chiller, we can't make ice with it? There would be no ice, or if that's end of life for it, or would it still, or are we bound by law to for safety reasons?
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay.
And, we talked to BC Technical Safety. They, there's a possibility, I guess, that they could say, you can continue to use it for another year, but just given fairly recent history and what can happen when those things go, I mean,
Absolutely.
it's better to deal with that for sure.
Yeah,
Councillor Roberts.
I think it's a
Sorry,
great
go ahead.
idea that
Further.
to purchase this stuff and for it to be able to be used in the future for something later on down the road, as long as we are forward thinking in the way of bigger, better, longer lasting. That it that's only what, 300 days or less till till it's no good. So I think it's a good decision to move forward with it.
Thank you, Councillor Dunneback. Councillor Roberts.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jim, if I could, the motion reads that you're looking to fund a portion of the Civic Center project, which includes the board, slab, and chiller. Am I to presume that there is another portion that needs to be handled with regard to the Civic Center?
Yeah, the way we had it budgeted previously, it was $2,441,650 for the project. We had that 1.9 million change was going to be grant funded, and then just about 450,000 was coming from reserves. So we'll continue to budget to take that 450 from reserves. And then, yeah, the rest would come from that Growing Communities Fund.
All right, thank you.
Right, yeah.
Thanks, Councillor. So just as a kind of bit of a historical thing, the Marysville Arena, the ice plant in the Marysville Arena was on life support for several years. And in fact, the inspector that comes around annually to inspect these things kept warning us that you better do something, you better do something. We didn't. And then finally one year he came in and said, that's it. It's either done this year or I'm shutting you down. And unfortunately what that did is caused us to move into, we got to do this right now. Council of the day voted not to shut the arena down for a year while we pursued grant money. Instead, that we would take all the money from reserves and fix it. So that that ice plant that's outside the arena there right now is pretty much brand new. It's about, I don't know, maybe 10 years old now, 8 or 10 years old. But it cost taxpayers just north of $800,000. No granting associated with it in any way, shape, or form. And so it's a cautionary tale that says, yeah, you can perhaps buy some time, but eventually it comes to roost, and proactive planning like this to make sure that we can afford to do what it is we're doing is just a really, really prudent thing to do. That was just such a difficult situation when it arose. What's happened since then, of course, is that there have been at least 2 or 3 incidents across the province, not the least of which was Fernie here a few years ago, where people actually lost their lives in the ammonia accidents. So the inspectors in the province are not that willing to let these things go for extended periods of time, and rightly so. It's dangerous. And so if we were attempting to try and get, on bended knee and say, give us 1 more year, I'm not sure we'd even get that anyway. Okay. So I guess the other comment I would make is that the Growing Communities Fund, it actually is a grant, right? It's a grant in advance of actually what you designated it for, but it's not like we're taking that out of reserves. It is truly a grant that's sitting there waiting to be used for for projects. And I guess a couple of other points I'd like to make. It sounds like everybody's in favor of this anyway, but I think it's important to note that a project, so let's say there was an alternate project of some kind, another building, whatever that was going to look like, the chances of that being finished in less than 5 to 10 years is remote. It would be in the $40 to $50 million range. I don't know if everybody's been listening to what's going on up in Golden, but they're simply putting in an aquatic center whose cost has now gone north of $40 million. So to look at integrated sports complexes, I mean, these are big dollar numbers. Very similar to the wastewater treatment plant. That particular project was 7 years in the making before we even got the grant, and we now have 4 more years before we're even going to have that thing built. So chances are, whatever happens with the ice surface, we're going to be out there a long way. And having the building continue to, I'll just use the term depreciate at the rate that it is right now as an older building, it just doesn't make an awful lot of sense. Councillor McBain's already mentioned that repurposing these pieces coming in, the ice plant, the boards and whatnot. It's all very modular, the way these are put together. So it's not like all of this money would be, would be sunk if we decided to do something else. And the other comment is that, this, by having boards and glass that can be taken down, which is the way these things are designed these days, we turn the Civic Center into a multi-use facility that can be used for a whole lot more than just an ice surface, for the ice users. It means new revenue sources, ultimately. It just provides us with a whole lot more flexibility. And my last comment is around the state of the building. We've been deferring $140,000 a year now for at least 3 years on the facelift for the building. And it now is arguably the most rundown building that we have in Kimberley. And honestly, we really, really need to do something with that at a minimum, and packaging all of this in with, with a project like this just seems to make sense. So, Councillor McBain.
I'm just trying to save Nicole some calls and headaches down the road. Because I think I know the answer to this. We feel like this type of work can get done in the off season to not disrupt any of the hockey season. I'm just anticipating you may get questions on it.
Thank you, Councillor McBain, for your question. In my past experience, these projects can take up to 18 months to complete. That being said, I think we can be creative with our options. We do have 2 ice facilities. I think it'll take some creativity on our users, and as well a friendly neighborhood knock to our friends in Cranbrook, who we have just helped accommodate for the last while as well.
Or Canal Flats. Regional District has a facility out there as well. So we do have some options. Yeah. It will be painful, whatever those options are, but a worthwhile investment. Councillor Cairns.
I'm in support of the motion, but I just have a question about with the ice maker chiller in Marysville being relatively new. What's the capacity of that? Would it be possible to, and it's kind of the cart before the horse, but I'm just wondering, in terms of that ice maker, is it mobile? And I guess, we need to have that one operating while this one is being replaced. But I just wonder what the options are around Marysville Arena.
Yeah. Nick or Nicole, did you want to directly answer that?
Yes, the Marysville Arena in principle is a movable unit. It was designed to potentially be relocated at some point. I would have to look at the specifics, but I think in some instances you're able to add additional plates to the chilling unit, which then increases the capacity to cool a larger ice surface. So it's all about the capacity of the ice surface it needs to cool is based on the plant size. So a larger rink like the Civic Center requires a larger plant to operate it versus Marysville, it's a smaller rink and a lot colder within the facility because of lack of insulation. Answer your question, sort of?
Several variables involved, but in
Yes.
principle, yes. Councillor Roberts.
Sorry to take so long with this. Just a flash went through me. Just to be really clear, when we talk about the slab, we're talking about the ice surface, right? Without the ice, the concrete slab, that is the where the ice builds.
Yeah.
And that's
Which
got
has
all the stuff built
piping.
inside of it. And that's why you wouldn't be able to sort of just plug something else in, because that stuff will be torn out, right? While we rebuild it.
It'll be
we redo it.
replaced.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just my mind
Yep,
was just
thank you
going
for
there.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, last comment to Councillor Dunnebeck.
So might be able to answer this. And it's sort of going to touch on both of your comments here. With that chiller being portable, there's also a synthetic sheet, apparently. Not the same. Wondering if there could be a synthetic sheet in the Marysville so that we have the chiller working in the big rink. Just for, if that's an option. If it's, I don't know, I just heard about it. Thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah, no, fair enough, Councillor Dunnebeck. These are early days, And we'll leave it up to staff to kind of figure out how to tiptoe through the minefield on this one. Did you want to make comment?
I was going to follow similar to that. You guys have allocated some dollars to help us do a nice feasibility study, which we're going to be using some mechanical engineers to answer these very difficult questions when they come to the operations of the rink. So we'll be looking at those things. We'll be looking at the costs of renovations versus new phased approaches. And I think that's a key word, is phased approaches. And then working with our partners to try and identify what would be best to be the least intrusive to seasons, because we certainly recognize the importance of getting out and getting active. So
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of direction to staff to put the bylaw together? Councillor Cairns, thank you. Councillor Roberts, seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Okay, next up, we have the council received first, second, and third readings for the 2023-20, shouldn't that be 2024? The 2027 5-year financial plan bylaw?
Nope. 23 to 27.
23 to
Yeah, it's the
27?
current plan, yeah.
Okay, yeah, since we're in 24. Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure that that wasn't a typo. Mover, please. Councillor Royer moves. Councillor Dunneback seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Awesome. Thank you, council. That's it for the special meeting. We now need a motion to go in camera. Councillor McBain, thank you. Councillor Dunneback seconds. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Thanks, folks. Thanks, council.